Tsawi duk shaklid, Shlachukwi, Uchuklaksa, Uchuklak Klas, Yaelten, Yaktik, Utsael. The week success, Ron DePoe, Abate success, Trish DePoe. Ron Utsaeshu, Chief Charlie DePoe, Rogue River Tututni Tribe of Oregon. Chief White Antelope, Southern Cheyenne. Trish Utsaeshu, John Hunter from Ozette, Whalen family. Ube Klitschke, Kwa, Flukshuk. What I just did, it's been a long day and a long week, right? What I just did is I introduced myself in my language, Wakashan from the Makah tribe. It's a traditional teachings that when we come up and we meet a new group, we tell them who we are, where we're from, and where we descend from. It sheds a little bit of light on our experience and our descendancy, and honestly, what's important to us. So what I just did there is I said, thank you for gathering here today. I said, my name is Yaelten from Usail. Yaelten is my Indian name. It was given to me when I was 15. It means the one everybody knows and talks to. Usail is Ozette, the northwest tip of Washington. I explained that my father is Ron DePoe, that my mother is Trish DePoe, and that my father descends from Chief Charlie DePoe, the Rogue River Tututni Band of Oregon, as well as Chief White Antelope of the Southern Cheyenne, and that my mother descends from John Hunter, which is a whaling family of Ozette. And then we like to end this off, Dubé Klchke, Kwa Flukshuk. It means everybody have peaceful feelings. That's the way we like to open up and start these conversations. To do a little table setting before we dive into the discussion, I was asked to speak on cultural humility today and what that really means to me. So I had some time to think about it, a couple of long nights adjusting to this time difference. It's definitely interesting when you wake up at 6 and then realize why you're so tired because it's 3 o'clock back home, right? So, but it gave me a lot of time to think about what cultural humility really means to me. And the more I thought about this, it really comes down to being empathetic from my perspective. Work to strive to be empathetic, work to strive for that empathy, understanding that I may never know what it really truly feels like to be a black man in America, but I can empathize. Just like that person will never truly understand what it means to be an indigenous person, but they can empathize. I understand what being up in our natural wilderness, praying and bathing means at the break of dawn when the sun comes up, and then to worry about somebody up there trying to take a picture of me. It means that you need to step back and understand what your actions are doing and what those actions, the actual impact that they have on those people. But also understand the decisions that you make and how you live your life. And understanding that everybody has unique differences and that everybody deserves that representation, a place at the table. Once again, striving to be empathetic. Sometimes those tables are full, but honestly, that just means you have to pull up another chair. So for this discussion today, I'm going to sit down and have a great conversation with my new friend here. We're going to discuss some of this from a perspective of my own, coming from tribal government, working for the state of Washington, and then some new experiences as I move through this statewide campaign. So thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end, and it should be a good one.
See that here? See that here, yeah. So y'all ready for us now? Hello, everybody. Hello. I've been visiting with some of you people around here. You all are a lovely, lovely group, right? I'm trying to sound like a game host. No, but this conversation that we're about to have, I want to ask you to have it to listen to it from a different place, not just as a spectator, but examine the thing that we talk about oftentimes in the work that we do. We call the toxic groundwater. Is anybody familiar with the groundwater, that term groundwater in relationship to DEI work and whatnot? Well, all right, so for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's an analogy that we use to describe the subconscious programming we received as children about people who are different from us. And as we're having this conversation, I want you to examine the messages you've heard about Native American people growing up and how that might impact the way we relate to Native American people, how it might impact the way we don't have relationship with Native people like we should. And they start expanding your understanding of how important it is to make that connection. Because to be connected to Native people is to be connected to ourselves. Because Native people are so close to the earth, it is for us to be connected to them, it's for us to be connected to ourselves. And I want you to listen to this conversation from that place of looking for messages that you've heard that are not true, that have deterred you from making connection. Because I know some of those messages have deterred me from making connection. I had to be intentional about making connection with Native people. So listen from that standpoint. So Patrick, I'm curious to know, like, what have been some of your greatest challenges in your quest to run for office in the state of Washington?
Appreciate that, Marty. So I was here earlier this afternoon when we were talking about the plenary at 1 o'clock, and somebody, lovely lady up here said, is there any firsts in the room? And she asked, and she looked around, she said, don't be scared to be a first. And I started thinking about that. And there's been so many different times that I've been in a room, looking around this room right here. I was joking with some of the young Indian Youth Corps that were sitting over in the corner, and I sat down with them for lunch, and I said, is this a tribal table? And we all busted out laughing, right? Because I was proud to watch them in their breakout room and get up there and speak in a room with a bunch of people that they weren't familiar with. That takes bravery, that takes heart, that takes passion. And when I think about this race that I'm in right now, it brings me back to that same kind of understanding of it's not easy to step forward and possibly be criticized, or honestly, be the first. I work for the Washington Department of Natural Resources right now. I started working there about a year ago. There's over 2,000 employees for the Washington State Department of Natural Resources. I was the only Native American to work for the Washington Department of Natural Resources. And so now I get a good joke out of it because I tell everybody I doubled our tribal our employment here, which means I hired one other Native at the DNR. And but at the same time, that one little step also provided more representation. Now that I'm running for a statewide elected position, some of the challenges that I've been finding interest in is I will visit a legislative district and they'll start the conversation off like, let's do a land acknowledgement. So we do a land acknowledgement. We say we understand this is the ancestral lands of so-and-so who've been stewarding these lands since time immemorial. And then we get into the conversation, and then when the question comes up is, what is your position on tribal sovereignty and understanding the connection and the overlap between Washington State Department of Natural Resources and sovereign nations here in Washington? And my answer is, you just got done doing a land acknowledgement. That's my understanding. That's literally my question that I always want to ask is, what are you going to do about it? Understanding there's never been a statewide elected Native American in the Pacific Northwest, not just Washington, Oregon, California, Washington. And so I started doing a little bit of homework. How many has there been elected in the history of the United States, statewide? I could only get to less than 5. 2024. And I'm looking at a management position, Commissioner of Public Lands, a management of our natural resources. And it's 2024, and there's never been a tribal person that's been in this position. That has that connection and understanding of government to government, but also the ability to work with all of Washingtonians and honestly the rest of the country when it comes to conservation and making sure we're working in sustainable ways.
Let's do this, because what you just got through saying is really important. Why do you think you were out here that he is the first in 2024. We in 2024. What are some of the things you think are contributing to him being the first Native American to be able to run for that office? What do you think has been some of the things that have contributed to him being the first?
Fear-based response to maintaining resources.
Wait, say it again.
A fear-based response to maintaining control over resources.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? What do you think has contributed to him being the first? In 2024, he the first.
Power hoarding.
Power hoarding. What do you mean?
People who have been in office for years and believing that a position belongs to them and the people that they believe should be in that office.
Thank you for that. Anybody else?
Does it help that Deb Haaland is the Secretary of Interior?
Does it help? Patrick, what do you think?
I think it definitely shed some light on it. But even Deb Haaland was a senator. She wasn't a statewide elected before she got that position. Now I think she would be a unbelievable statewide elected. But I think you're getting to something though, and when you talk about that, and although it helps, that's the political push, right? And folks saying that we got to do everything we can to make sure a certain party isn't elected in. And are you sure that you can win that race is some of the questions that I get. And when they say that, you know what, Patrick, maybe it's not your time yet because we fear so much of that other political pressure. But unless you have the bravery to step out there, you're not going to get the change that you keep asking for. So I like that.
Anybody else?
Including, which I didn't even know until literally this year, and I'm the finance director, so I'm not a social work guy. But until this year, coming in contact with the ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. And 1978, it had come before Congress because at that point, my understanding, if I get these numbers slightly off, about 28% of all Native children had been removed from their families. Like more than a quarter of all of the children were being removed from their families. You do that, and that was 1978, so there's just the recovery of families getting back together and dealing with, I know everybody in this room deals with kids that have had trauma and stuff, so I think that on its own, aside from perceptions that we've got about different peoples and everything, it just tears down anybody's ability to try and move forward.
Thank you for that. That was real detailed. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Sorry, for Bryce and I are together, but also in our community, we're in northern Michigan, so we're in Ananashbek country, Adawa, Ottawa, Chippewa. You would have a hard time getting elected given the state of fishing rights in our state right now, which is there's this huge fight and a tremendous amount of pushback by sports fishermen over Native fishing rights, and that's been that way for 150 years, and it continues. Every certain period of time, they have to renew this whole conversation and process around Native fishing rights, and every year you can feel the racism in the community that I live in, Leelanau County, rise with that conversation. And so I don't know how you get work past that, man.
Thank you for that.
A lot of work.
Mind if I respond to that?
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
This is interesting to me. So, yeah, it wasn't too long ago there was shirts being made that said "Save a walleye, kill an Indian." Right? So I'm from Makah. We're a whaling community, whaling tribe, and there were shirts in '99 that were saying "Save a whale, kill a macaw." And I just want to, because I don't often get these kind of audiences, so I want to share something real quick about those tribal treaty rights and those rights that you're talking about. It's not just the right to harvest those. It's the protections that those treaties provide those resources for everybody. Those protections mean that those resources are supposed to be there in perpetuity. It's in those people's best interests that are constantly fighting those tribes on those harvest rights for them to have those protections for those resources so they themselves can partake in those resources and they can have their kids partake in those resources. Once again, it's those protections that are, basically covered those resources. And there's this understanding, I guess, we'll call it just a horrible, wrong perspective that, those Indians just get to fish. No, those Indians are protecting those resources under their treaty rights for here on out. I've heard so many different senators, even the governor of Washington State, so on and so forth, have said salmon would be gone for Washington if it wasn't for the protections of the treaties. But it's in the sportsman's best interest. It's in the tribe's best interest. It's in Washingtonians' best interest. It's in those folks in Michigan's best interest that want to be able to send their kids out doing the same thing that they were able to do. And just being able to change the narrative is so important. Instead of a us and them, you bring up Indian Child Welfare Act and some of the things that happened in '78. In the 80s, there was still women from tribal nations going to Indian health services for their annuals, and unbeknownst to them, they're being sterilized. In the 80s. I know some of the kids like to say, you were born in the 1900s, but the 80s wasn't that long ago. And once again, it becomes an us and a them thing, not understanding the benefit of that collaboration, the benefit of that relationship, the benefit of truly understanding what that cultural humility means and taking everybody's interest into perspective.
Thank you for that response. In this room, there's a lot of people that work with the land, correct? What have you been learning from working with the land? What are some things you've been learning from working with the land that will connect you to Native people? Without you even knowing me saying, I said it at the end. What have you been learning about working with the land? So hold on for a second. Did you say the land is alive?
Yeah.
Patrick, what do you think about
I
that?
said that the land's alive, for those who didn't hear me.
The land is alive. Is that true?
I love it. Yes, I would definitely. From our perspective, when we're thinking about our environment around us, it's a spiritual, it's culture, it's heritage. It's a place of prayer. For us, sometimes in certain cases, it's a church. But that's the impact. And I like, you didn't understand, you thought it was just going to be Marty and I having a discussion. No, we're having a discussion with you in the room. So this is beautiful.
Yeah. So it's alive. My mind is blown when he said that it's alive. So what kind of things does that alive thing, that being we call Earth, what's some of the things it's been saying to you? Because if it's alive, it has a way of communicating. What has it been? What has been up to telling you? Because we see a lot of shifts happening on our planet, correct? And it's kind of hard to know who to believe. But you can believe the Earth if she talked to you. So what is she saying to us?
It's getting too hot.
It's getting hot in here. I ain't gonna say the other part. So she talking to us, right? She talking to us.
All eyes came to me because that was last night. But as far as what that said to me and what nature does, it seems to have a way of equating and equalizing everyone despite the majority will.
So Earth has its own equalization process. And throughout spans of time, that equalization process has meant a whole lot of us being disappeared. What are you learning from the Earth? What are you learning? Patrick, what are your people focused on right now as it relates to the changes in the Earth that are happening, that they see?
Where I'm from, we recognize it firsthand. We have our annual, yearly salmon seasons. And we notice that in certain areas, salmon are deeper than they've ever been. They're looking for that colder water. We see that the rivers and the in-stream flows aren't as strong as they used to be because that snow isn't on the mountains like it used to be. We're seeing more forest fires than we've ever seen in history, which once again, burning up those trees, recognizing that.
What does that lead to if all those trees are destroyed? You talk to me like I'm a kid. What happens? What happens if?
I mean, there's so many different levels from a perspective of Niabe. It's a loss of culture. It's a loss of heritage. Imagine somebody just ripping your religion away and saying that it's no longer there to use, and then trying to substitute it with something else that just doesn't have the same impact, the same meaning. And so when I'm thinking about climate change and this climate crisis, and like you said, the earth being alive, it's telling us what's happening right now. If we don't do what needs to be done, it's happening in real time.
That's deep when you think about it, right? Anybody else? What's the earth telling you? You're working with the land. What has the land been telling you? Exploitation? And end the exploitation. I'm sorry. Hard of hearing. Anybody else?
Humility. I mean, like, explain it to somebody what the latest technology is in natural resources. It's like just undoing the stupid stuff that it did. It's just putting it back to how it was before we messed it up.
Wow. When I was looking at something, I was a long time ago looking at the start of ecology, the science of ecology. And they said most of the stuff that they were working on or focused on were things that were thought of as a problem that weren't a problem. We went to fix them and made a problem. And we still dealing with all the problems we made that wasn't a problem in the first place. How does that impact your people? Because I know your people knew there wasn't a problem. And then you have to watch us come fix the problem that wasn't a problem, that created a problem for you all.
There's been so many meetings that I've been a part of where there's a question, how do we fix this issue? Or we want you to fix this issue that you didn't create. And I mean, that covers, and overlaps with so many other cultures as well in this country. We want you to fix the issue that we didn't create. And so is there any federal folks still in this room? I'm just curious. So I see a couple of hands. You probably heard on the federal level, tribal ecological knowledge, right? And integrated some of that in practices. NOAA did a tribal ecological knowledge book, and same thing with BOEM on consultation, getting back to Deb Holland and consultation. But took us to now to realize that, hey, these people who've been here forever might have known what they were doing. Like, wow. Like, just now, just all of a sudden, these people that have, and like I said, getting back to those land acknowledgements, these people that have been stewarding these lands since time immemorial might have had a clue of what they were doing. So now let's go back and talk to them in 2024 and ask them for help for a problem that they didn't create, but let's ask them for help because we need to get ourselves out of this mess, right?
You used the word just now, stewardship. I mean, that's the reality we all can absorb working with the land, that we're stewards of the land. Hopefully there's gonna be someone coming after you that's gonna be using the land. I think, but in our consciousness, a lot of us don't pass on the reality that somebody's always coming behind us. How are you gonna leave? How are you gonna leave the place? What type of part of your upbringing, your native upbringing, holds those principles as being the steward of the land? And what some of the things that you were taught that made you, that really got that to sink into your being? Not just something that you talk about or perform, but it's like a part of your way of life.
There was a metaphor I was told once. When you're walking in a river and you kick over a rock, you put that rock back. Sounds so simple, so simplistic, yet has such a strong meaning behind it. You put that rock back. That's a teaching, that's an understanding. That's an environment that is a certain way that should be kept that way. But it's teachings like that that we grow up with, in my community. And I also want to let you know that I'm Makah. That's where I grew up in Nia Bay. But at the same time, because I'm in a room with a bunch of folks that aren't necessarily familiar with Makah or other tribal interests probably, that I can only speak from where I come from. Different tribe in a different area might have different teachings, but we all can come back to understanding the importance of this country that we live in, or this world that we live in, and the natural environment, and what that means to all of us. Especially when you say it's alive, because one might even say that it's dying.
That's good, Patrick. Thank you. Explore, I want to hear another person tell me what the land has been telling you. Because there's nothing like being told straight up by the horse's mouth, the horse talking straight to you.
Bobby got the next one.
I was going to say that the land, it's definitely telling us we're all connected and that we have a oneness with the land. And we see that from the harm that when we poison the land, we're poisoning ourselves. When the land is healing, we're healing. But, from even during the pandemic, just the isolation, we're isolating the land. There's just so much. And if we realize that we're one with the land, we'll respect it a bit more. And us in the room, we get that. But there's so many that don't.
Thank you for that. I know in this room there's a lot of people that work with the land, so we could consider ourselves a part of the choir. But I guarantee you the choir need to practice and rehearse so they can sound in tune. Because the better they are in tune, the more people they can impact. Nobody looking for a choir that's come in and sing all off key. Right? So what we're having this conversation for us to gets on key. And what does that really mean? That means be in alignment about something. Can we be in alignment about the idea that the earth, Mother Earth, is talking to us and we're not listening? So what does Mother Earth need us to do? To become Mother Earth's voice. The native people were that voice. Would you talk about that, Patrick?
A lot of folks from my community, even the state of Washington, will say, we're here to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, talking about whether it's the salmon, talking about if it's the trees, but understanding that if somebody doesn't speak up for them and show that hurt that's being caused, that's not going to be there in the future. Everything that we're taught, everything that we learn growing up, it's all sustainability. It's growing up and understanding. I grew up walking those rivers with my father. I understand salmon restoration and essential habitat for salmon because I grew up seeing the life cycle of salmon. And then we're in those forests and we're understanding the different uses of our wood, those trees and how they sustained us. We understand that you use cedar for canoes, for example, because if it cracks, it's going to swell up and that canoe won't sink. So you need those trees to be there. That was our basically our lifeline for that ocean. We're an ocean-growing tribe. So we needed those trees, we needed those canoes. We understood that certain roots, certain ferns were antibiotics, help with sore throats. We understood that you used hemlock, for example, for cooking with because it was at the right temperature for your foods. You understood that you used crabapple trees. Their roots grew straight down. So if there was a forest fire, you surrounded your village with crabapple trees and a forest fire got to your village, that fire would burn out in the ground. It wouldn't spread across into other trees.
What?
There was an understanding of that.
Hold on. Your people knew how to do that. Why haven't we, copied that? All the forest fires are going on. Why aren't we copying that? Because we're not in relationship with the people. We keep doing things out of relationship with people. We should have a relationship with Native people. Those of us who are working with the land, we should have a relationship with Native people. A lot of the things that we are experiencing, like those forest fires, that we would gain knowledge and science around how this stuff works. Everything has a place and a purpose. It's okay if you don't know, but relationships will give you the pipeline to find out. But some of us got to be willing to say, man, I don't know. Because if you don't admit to yourself that you don't know, then you keep acting like you know. And you know what happens when you keep acting like you know? You're going to really find out. You're going to find out what you really know.
You're going to learn today.
So keep going, Patrick, because what you were saying, it just atoms popped in my brain when you said that about how you stop the fire and how natural it is, because it's like it recycles itself.
There's a crabapple trees. We've done what's called cultural burn-ins. And so we burn prairies. And burning certain prairies, it would kill the weeds. And those fruits would grow back. Those fruit would grow back in that prairie just luscious, right? And at the same time, it would be more fertilizer for more to grow every single year. Once again, the tools are there. The tools were already being used. And you said, why haven't we done this? Well, you know, it's 2024, and I'm thinking people are starting to think it might be an idea to look at.
Bro, you know that's...
Nobody had to run this over to me. So trees are crops in this country. That's one of the problems. So it's looked as a item that you sell. So that's probably why they're not looking at how we plant our trees and how we develop, rows of trees for crop purposes and stuff is different than how you folks would have looked at it, I imagine, or still look at it. My question to you is how you were talking to the folks here, the federal folks here, about now you're just asking us, and I mean, we have to, and we're maybe only now coming to that understanding, like, whoa, what did we do? How do we fix this? And now we're coming back to tribal folks and having these conversations around race and around other things and needing to talk to the people who have suffered because of the color of their skin or from where they're from. And I think the only way we're gonna figure that out is for the folks that have had to deal with it to tell us how to, ask for that help to understand and learn. And I don't, that's something we're all working on. There was a lot of work this week talking about ancestral lands corps and Indian Youth Services corps and stuff. And it was clear the biggest part of that was that you had to engage with tribal communities and bring tribal members and community members into your program and be at levels in the program so that they could guide you and they could help build those relationships, not partnerships. I was reminded to not consider it a partnership, but a relationship. And so do you have any thoughts yourself, like how does that happen for you? How will that happen for you? Because you're gonna be asking for voters and they're gonna look like me or like him or her if you're running for office at some point. And I'm just wondering how you help with that process, or can you?
In regards to that specific situation, I mean, with what I talk to voters about is honestly a lot of my management past experience. I was 20 years a first responder, so it was said that I ran ships up and down the coast. I have my captain's license. I ran oil response ships, but also dug fire lines to protect neighborhoods, right? And I've done sustainable timber harvest management. I've done salmon restoration projects. And I explained to voters that, my experience is more of a inside the box, or to say, understanding of what's happening right now on the ground, rather than somebody looking in there, possibly a politician that's never been in that area before, and wondering, or saying this would be a good thing to do. But in regards to outreach and questions about who we should talk to, how we should talk to them, even that can be a problem in itself, because then possibly everybody goes and starts asking an Indian. And I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you have 17 people all coming and asking questions all at once. It can cause anxiety, it can cause irritation, it can cause frustration. So there's respectful ways to go about it with everything. And a lot of these councils around the country, they have processes. And it's good to familiarize yourself with those processes if you're a federal agency. And a lot of federal agencies, they understand that as well. And they work with those different places, they work with those different departments, and it gets to the right people on that tribal council that might be able to, shed some light within those consultations. But I got to tell you, during COVID, I felt like I was in about 5 consultations a day for like 2 years. And it'll wear you out. It'll wear you out. And so trying to collaborate, not just on asking the questions, but on how to ask the questions, I think is another big part of that. How do you do that when you know the people you're talking to have limited capacity? And so those are things that I think should be taken into consideration, whether it's an NGO group or it's a federal agency or a state agency, is not necessarily who you got to ask, but how you ask that and how you go, what are the steps that you should go respectfully about asking those questions so you're not just inundating those people.
Thank you for that, Patrick. I want to ask you another question. What are some of the things that Mother Earth has been saying to us that we've been ignoring? Because, the things you ignore says a lot about state of mind. What are some of the things that we've been ignoring that Mother Earth has been saying to us?
No, I got it. Stop it.
Sorry about that. To be more mindful of, my apologies. To be more mindful of our resources and to ask permission before we take them.
So we've been ignoring that Mother Earth has been telling us to be more mindful about the resources we're using.
Yeah.
How many of you are guilty of ignoring that message? But we got to start taking that stuff serious. Here in America, think about this, we have access to water, seems like it's unlimited. But then you start seeing more and more contamination of water, the bottled water, water in the pipes are soaked full with all kinds of chemicals. It's almost like we're running out of time. We're going to wake up one day, not only we're not going to be able to afford to buy water, but the water that's coming out of our taps won't even be safe to bathe in. Thank you for that. What other message Mother Earth has been giving us that we've been acting like we ain't hearing?
It tells me that we need her more than she needs us.
Boy, when a woman tell you something like that, boy, you better believe it.
You notice how we said her. Yeah, you better listen to her.
You best believe it, baby.
You better listen to her.
Anybody else?
Stop focusing so much on the problems, start focusing on working together for the solutions.
Boy, you said a mouthful there.
Can we give that a round of applause?
Yes. Because you know what? You have ESP, because you read my mind. That's what I was about to talk about. I wanted Patrick to talk about some possible solutions to some of these environmental issues, right? And then turn to you and let you contribute to some solutions. Because, see, we spend a lot of time fighting against stuff, but we don't spend enough time creating some stuff. Because if you fight 24 hours a day, at the end of the 24 hours, you ain't gonna have nothing to show for the fighting. You ain't gonna have nothing to contribute to your kids and the next generation from all the fighting. The only time you're gonna be able to have something to contribute to the next generation is if you created something, a part of a solution to the problem that we've been experiencing. That's why we need relationships with each other so we can do this, because we can't do this alone. We have to do it together. It's been set up that way. So Patrick, let's talk about some solutions. What do you see in the forecast in terms of solution-wise for some of the problems that we're having?
My familiarity is with Washington State. But once again, what we're talking about right here, right now is cultural humility. And having that humility to understand you don't have all the answers. Having that humility to understand that relationships, collaborations, and partnerships are important. Whether it's understanding essential habitat needed in certain areas for the survival of those resources, and talking and collaborating with those people that are right there on the ground that see it on a day-to-day basis, understanding what's sustainable and sustainability actually looks like, actually means,
Well,
and our uses.
Stop for a second. I don't want to cut you off, but I want you to talk about what it looks like and what it means. Sustainability, like for real. So they, like my dad used to say, talk cornbread, boy. I want you to break that down in cornbread language. What does that mean so we can know from a native perspective? Sustainability and
Sustainability means in perpetuity. It means that that resource will always be there. It means management not taking too much. And once again, that sounds so simple, not taking too much. There's no reason to be a glutton. There's uses, but so tribes, for the most part, that I have engaged with, were fishers, were hunters. A lot of you guys would read and learn that we're hunter-gatherers, right? But you'll understand that it's not that we're against fishing, we're not against hunting, we're not against, uses of natural resources. We're against overuse of fishing, overuse of hunting, overuse of those natural resources to the point where they disappear. A story, Stillaguamish tribe of Washington State. I have so much respect for these folks. There were stories that you could go out when you were hungry and go into the river and just grab a fish. You didn't need to fish for it, you just go out there and grab one. Now they manage for sometimes a return of 10 king salmon a year that they're allowed to harvest for their entire community. 10. For their entire community, that's all that they are possibly allowed. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's a couple more, but it's right in that area. Now, if that ain't Mother Earth telling you something's out of balance, out of whack, telling you that something is overused in certain areas, I don't know what is. But it gets back to listening, understanding, realizing that somebody's trying to tell you there's a problem right in front of you. Let's start getting to the conversations about the solutions. And what does that mean? And we start finding and following. In a lot of cases with salmon, you can follow the fish. You can follow the fish and look at the life cycle of those fish and the cycle of where they're going and how they come back. And you can see what might need to be changed. Is it overharvest? Is it amount of pollution? King salmon are constantly polluted with high levels of PCBs. Okay, well, that's just the king salmon. Southern resident killer whales of Washington State eat those king salmon. Now those whales are polluted with those PCBs. Minority groups, and especially tribes, eat those king salmon. And with those high levels of PCBs, now all of a sudden, we're at an exponential risk for cancer just for partaking in a diet that's supposed to be natural. That literally, they're telling you there's a problem. And once again, you just follow, okay, well, why? Well, PCBs is because somebody's polluting somewhere. Well, who's polluting? You just can follow that trail, and then you can start talking about, okay, get to the federal level. EPA, let's look at water quality standards, right? You can look at state water quality standards. You can start looking at different industry practices. I mean, it doesn't take a genius just to follow the trail. And once again, collaboration, cultural humility, working with those people that are seeing that in real time.
Thank you for that, Patrick. When you were saying it, I was thinking about something I heard President Roosevelt say one time. In his famous statement, he says, you can get whatever you want in life as long as you don't care who get the credit. Listen, the conditions that we find ourselves confronted with, there are people who have the solutions to them as long as we don't care who get the credit. Our ego will get us in the way of establishing relationships with people that are not just about our survival, but our thriving. What do you think about that, Patrick? Because I want to make sure we give people a chance to talk about some of the possible solutions. Talk about a few more solutions that you see on the horizon from your people.
Once again, I'm focused on Washington right now. And I can go back to 2014 and show you that there was, I see the numbers now, over 1 million acres burned for wildfires. Over 1 million acres. 1 million acres of land was burned for wildfires.
Hold on for a second. Hold on. can you draw a picture of 1 million acres, just in our mind, like on the map? What are you looking at, 1 million acres?
I have a difficulty counting to 1 million acres.
Can you give us just a maybe like, is it Texas? Is it the size of Texas? The size of, how big? The valley? Death Valley. The entire park. So that's a lot, right? I don't, I ain't, I'm just, that's a lot though, right?
1,500 square miles.
Wow. Wow. Y'all don't hear that siren? Woo, 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 woo. See, we become numb to hearing the sirens. We've become numb to listen to the sirens. We hear sirens so often, coming up and forth down the street. Hold on for a second. We listen to the sirens coming up and down the street all the time so often that we're becoming numb to what a siren is for. There's an emergency happening, and it's right in front of our face when we've numbed to the emergency signs. That's not a, we got time sound. That's a emergency sound. Remember one time I was going through a counseling session with a spiritual advisor, and one of my, the battery in the fire detector in the house it went out, and they would just beep in the background, beep, beep, beep. She said, are you gonna do something about that? I was like, oh no, it's been like that for a couple of weeks. She says, you must be crazy. She said, you are numbing your brain to an emergency signal. You're making the emergency signal normal and you're ignoring it. So that means by the time the real thing happens, it's gonna be too late. We're getting the emergency signals, people. The alarms are going off. Let's talk about solutions. Patrick?
There's tribes in Washington that have done the same thing that I talked about with our prairie cultural burns. They've done that since time immemorial. And that's honestly, in a lot of ways, cleaning up the fuel on the ground for those forests. Preventative measures. We've definitely bolstered up our response time at DNR in this last year. We've had record number of forest fires in Washington State, but we still, and I don't want to say still because to me it's still a lot of acres, but that number has dropped down to less than 200,000 acres because of the extra money that we dedicated to that area in our response. But responding, once again, is being reactive. So how do we be proactive? And comes back to working with those folks that understand, that land management. Whether it's Colville or Yakima, or big tribes on the east side of the mountains in Washington State, where a lot of those fires take place. Spokane, Kalispell, they still have understandings of that forest management that they've always done. Those stories are still there, those stories are still passed down, those practices are still understood. But it takes a cultural humility to understand that you have to sit down and have a conversation with them and say, hey, how have you guys done this in the past? Let's stop working on responding and start working on preventing.
I don't want to get too close to the end without giving people an opportunity to ask questions. So we have like a question and answer, and then give Patrick an opportunity to close out with what he wants us to take away back to our homes and our communities. Because we are also stewards of the land. Those of us who work with the land have to be stewards of the land, have to become, if you haven't committed yourself to it yet, you need to commit yourself to being a steward of the land. Because Mother Earth needs your voice to speak on behalf of her. Patrick?
Are we going to do Q&A first, or do you want me to close us out?
Well,
Q&A, please don't be bashful about any questions.
I just was going to share something. We got to talk earlier, which was great. One of the things I always think about, how things that happen, at least that humans do, because someone did them. So the what or the thing that happens doesn't happen without the person. And so I always look around for people who have amazing ideas or amazing things, and I try to help them, like find the doers. And I think that's one of the methods that we're talking about here. And so maybe share two small examples for scale. One was we were honored at MIT, I'm on the board there, to have Phyllis Young and LaDonna Bravebull Allard visit us from Standing Rock when those protests were happening, the water keepers. And they were receiving an award, elder. And Phyllis said, thanks for this award, but I don't want to just go home with this. I seek a partnership. And so what we structured from that is we use the dusty institution, a university, we happen to use MIT, to structure a partnership. And what we did was we created something with Phyllis and LaDonna called the MIT Solve Indigenous Communities Fellowship. This fellowship was just asking people first in the Lakota community, and then Navajo Hopi, and then the whole country, and now Canada too, each year from 2017, who's already fixing certain things? What would you like help with? And people just said 22 people applied. That year we had 6 fellows. So each year we have 8 fellows, Native American leadership, who are doing extraordinary things, often on a reservation or other places. Now we have 45 fellows that we're lucky to work with. And it's a way to kind of, I mean, I got the chance to work in Silicon Valley. You know, somebody helps Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, so why don't we help some other people too? Because like they seem to be messing a lot of stuff up, even though whatever. So I think like if we can think about how to help, not only what you were talking about, which I can see that consultation teamwork, but not be extracting knowledge alone, but like lifting up the kind of leadership that's out there. And just one more thing I'd share, we did this with the United Nations when we did the Sustainable Development Goals ratification from all the countries in 2015. We felt like the UN would then say, okay, now how do we fix this? And they'd put their heads down. So what we did was we proposed to them to social storm the world, asking who's already fixed these SDGs somewhere? What do you have that's working or possibly already working or promising? And we got 1,400 submissions from 141 countries in 3 weeks of things people were already doing. And so if we could use the internet for finding the solution makers, of which we then had 14 people take the stage 1 hour after ratification, 4 minutes each, solving things, gender balance, geo balance, topic balance, from all over the world. And then we used the community together to accelerate what they were doing. So it's sort of a community organizing idea of how to do that. So as we think as the core network, we have an amazing network. How do we notice amongst each other things we've already fixed and move faster to celebrate those innovators, solution makers, and share it faster, just as a methodology. So find the doers and help them, especially Native.
I love that. I love that, because what that's doing is increasing the amount of connection. But we need to be taking note of what's working.
Yes.
Yeah, we should be doing that. Patrick?
I would, I really just, I love it. I mean, the fact that you guys are already doing that, you know, and honestly, this is my first, Corps event that I've been to. But I will say, stepping in and out of the breakout rooms, meeting folks here, you know, I'm more than happy to commit wherever I can to help out, you know, foster some relationships, facilitate some conversations, whatever that looks like in Washington State. You know, because once again, I believe that, you know, connecting people with the ones that are able to do right on the ground is most important. You know, because we could talk about problems all day long, you know, but unless we're talking about solutions, what's an award? Yeah, I get that. You know, great, appreciate the award. Now, how is this going to help me get water back to Standing Rock, right? You know, how is this going to stop that pipeline, you know? But at the same time, that recognition elevates that voice. And when you elevate that voice, more people hear it. And then when more people hear it, you might find more people with more ideas, right? So there is a domino effect that can take place with those things as well. So it's beautiful what you guys are already doing. I'm really, really happy to hear that.
Anybody else has a question, comment? Anybody else? That's what I'm talking about right
Your
there.
sport, yeah.
Deliver, baby, deliver.
So we could talk about that real quick. The interesting part about
Repeat the question. Well, yeah.
For those of us in Washington State, how do we vote for you?
And how do you make connections to have people vote for him?
So
say that. That's what I'm talking about. Bam, baby. You heard that, right? All right, good.
So if you guys want a little understanding of my qualifications and my background, I'm telling you, DePoe4Washington.com. You'll see a video of where I'm from. That video will talk about what I'm standing for, and that's a big hurdle as well. I come from a reservation of 1,700 people. That's my community. Town next door to me has 400 people. Town next door to that has 15 people. It's actually considered a town, Beaver, 15 people. I mean, so the closest actual community, Seattle, when you get into those cities, it's a 4-hour drive. And so when you're talking about availability of resources, once again, people from rural communities, people from reservations, we're normally in isolated places. So we don't have that same relationships where we can just go downtown to a city hall and have thousands of people show up to hear our message. We need to be able to reach strategic folk and spread that message. And one of the ways to spread that message, it really comes back to those donations you're talking about. And it's horrible about politics, but unless you have money to spread your story, to tell your story, that's one of Billy Frank's mantras from Seattle, is tell your story. But it's hard to tell your story if you don't have the funds to tell your story. And that is another reason why possibly you haven't seen folks from my background or from communities like mine that have been able to make this leap. But for voting, you just register. It's a statewide elected. It's just like voting for the governor. You'll see it on the statewide ballot.
I'll say this too. Money is pretty up there, but it does not outperform relationships.
No.
I'm gonna say it again. Money is pretty up there, but it does not outperform relationships. I've seen relationships do karate when I ain't have no money. It does not outperform relationships. So being connected is so important. Crossing over the barriers that have been put in our minds to really make connection with people that are different from us is so essential right now.
Mm-hmm.
It should be on all our agenda. Any other questions or comments? And then Patrick's gonna close us out with a come to Jesus conversation.
It's a lot of pressure, man.
Anybody else? Question, comment? There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Hold on.
Thank you. So we live in an area with incredible indigenous knowledge, but our people are not federally recognized. So it's almost like they don't have that validation for their voice to be heard. So even though we do our best to engage and work, they don't check that box, so their tribes and their members are not. So it seems like there's a little gap missing there, because there's got to be more people like that across the country who have this foundation, but they've not been validated by the process.
Hawaiians? I would honestly, just to be frank, that doesn't mean that their voice isn't as important. That doesn't mean that indigenous knowledge does not exist. And if you I don't know if you're part of that tribe or if you just understand where that tribe is, you understand that they're there. And if you understand that they're there, then you understand that you can talk to them. It doesn't change that the recognition still means the recognition or the non-recognition of those folks from that area does not mean that they're not from that area anymore. it means that those conversations can still be had, especially when you're talking about land management issues. There's different venues, there's different forums, there's different folks, whether it's treaty tribes, executive order tribes, non-recognized tribes, rancheras in California, villages in Alaska. There's definitely different levels all over the place. Well, once again, it comes back to the core, you're indigenous to that land. And you have cultural teachings, cultural practices that are unique to that land. And for any group that's working with those people, are better off understanding their story and their background than they would be if they just went around and didn't work with anybody because there was a title that was missing, right? But on a federal level, on a state level, there's going to be different recognition. But once again, it doesn't mean that those teachers don't exist anymore. So you know who they are, you know where they're at. I would encourage you still to have those conversations and encourage other people to have those conversations too, because that indigenous knowledge exists, and it exists with those people that have been there forever. So I guess closing out?
Yeah, closing
Okay,
out.
let's come to Jesus.
So Mary Ellen with the Core Network. To your point that relationships, I think, sometimes outweigh money. In 2016, or before 2016, I thought that democracy kind of worked by itself. It just was self-sustaining, that all I had to do was vote. And I realized that I had to become a participant, that I had to volunteer on campaigns. I had to go door to door on weekends, and I had to talk about my candidates and my... so I think that one way that we can help people in Washington can help you, and we, white people, can help candidates of color, are going to the communities where we have connections and telling your story. So not just giving you the money so you can tell your story, but going to door in our own neighborhoods and saying, I support Patrick and this is why, and I think you should too. So mobilizing our own networks. Anyway, so I just...
See, that's why you get paid the big bucks, right there.
So anyway, I mean, find candidates that support your values and get off your butt and help them.
See what I'm saying? Why you get paid the big bucks.
Oh, I was stretching out. My neck and my I don't know about anybody else, but I missed my bed at home. You know, I just want to say thank you to Capri for inviting me. I know my, yeah, let's give her a round of applause. Conversations we've had before are just amazing. I know my big cousin has been here plenty of times, and I got to say he's definitely flashy and can speak really well. You know, Jossie Ross is I always give him his flowers whenever I get a chance because that guy's been a mentor to me also growing up. But, you know, this meant a lot to come here to be able to speak to you folks. And when we're talking about cultural humility, it took me a little while to think about, okay, cultural humility, how are we going to address this? How are we going to talk about this? And then you start relating it to your own experiences about things that I'm going through right now with regards to transitioning from a tribal government position to a state position to a place where there was no natives before, like just one. I took the only other native that was in that DNR. They left because they were in my position. And then when they left, I got hired into that position. And so this is something for everybody to understand, you know, that it takes bravery, it takes heart, it takes the willingness to step up if you want to make a change. If you really want to affect change, then you got to be willing to step outside your comfort zone. You know, getting back to relationships are more important than money? Absolutely. That is what's missing today, is we're hyper-focused on money. We should be hyper-focused on how do we work together? How do we collaborate? How do we build that relationship? You know, so if I can leave you guys with any kind of final thoughts about cultural humility, it's just don't be bashful about thinking that you don't know everything. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, reach out to people. Understand that if you have a table and you're missing representation, you're missing a voice, pull up an extra chair, reach out. If it's somebody that's not federally recognized, that doesn't change the fact that that voice is still there and it still matters, and that teaching and understanding also still exists. You know, get rid of all the titles, get rid of the definitions, and just be able to talk to each other. Don't do this and this. It got to be working together. It got to be this right here. Because if we're not all moving in the same direction with this crisis that we're dealing with, especially right now, thinking about the climate crisis of today, it's just going to get worse. We're going to be hyper-focused on everybody screaming about, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. But we're not going to focus on solutions when we do that. So let's work together, let's come together, let's collaborate, let's partner, let's build relationships, and let's just do a hell of a job together, folks. I appreciate your time. Thank you.